family, we made Rhone type wines, but gradually I started noticing, suspecting, and then experimenting, and then noticing that the best blends were not the traditional French blends at all. The best blends tend to be here, going across. And one of my, the way I explain this to myself, true or not, I don't know, but when you blend various grapes together from the same terroir, the common denominator is the terroir, it's the soil, and it brings it up to the surface. And in a way, the more different the grapes are, the more true it becomes, because the varieties, as far as varietal character, to some degree cancel each other out. And again, the soil comes to the surface. So if you want to make wines that the soil is the predominant character, that's, at least in principle, could work. And I've tried this now for many years, and it seems to work. And that's why, like, the Carte Blanche for me was a blend of basically Bordeaux, Rhone, and Burgundy varieties all across. It does not work to 100%, meaning there are some grape varieties that in their own character do not tend to blend well with others. So you can't ignore it. But most grape varieties work very well together, even if they were not traditionally in any region in the world.
So that uniqueness, you like to just sort of experiment with that, knowing your land first and foremost, and what different characteristics you have. Do you think that gives you, knowing that first and foremost, allows you therefore a little flexibility to experiment more?
Yes, although in Clos Saron, well, we started making wines in Clos Saron, whatever, 13 years ago or 14 years ago, 13 years ago. And there was more experimentation in the first few years until we got to having the leases in place. And the leases were based on both my experimentation at Clos Saron and previously at Renaissance, because I already developed quite a good familiarity with the terroirs and the various microclimates and soil variations in this region. And from Renaissance used to have many, like 20 different varieties, and a mind-boggling variety of soil types and microclimates, exposures. They had north exposure, south exposure, east and west, over 700 feet altitude difference. So it gave me an incredible palette of experience of what is planted where and what works and what does not work, what do you blend with what, and so on. So my first few years were like, I don't know, like an explosion of experimentation and learning and observations. And gradually I started making choices as what seems to work better here in this terroir than other. And now, well, since I recently have been purchasing fruit, so again there's a new wave of experimentation like this Albarino, Verdejo, and Chardonnay. That's an invented blend based on some semi-educated guesses, and it worked well from round one. And the way I think of blending or co-fermenting is in building blocks. I think in terms of alcohol, acidity, body, intensity, things like that, rather than this aromatic profile with this aromatic profile and how they complement or extend or expand each other. I think in the building blocks, because I figure, at least my experience shows me, that if you get those right, and if the balance of the wine is truly good, naturally, and you don't need to adjust anything, the wine is going to be good at least. And it can be fantastic, but it will be somewhere between good and fantastic. It's not going to be below that. Whereas if you start fiddling around, trying to create some imaginary complexity or harmony of different flavors and so on, you can end up anywhere from awful to great. And life is too short for that. So you have to start with something that is going to work.